Typically, no. So one of the things that I always try to really focus on and pay attention to from an engineering perspective is there's the design and architecture for the moment, and then there's the design and architecture that will always be relevant. And building something that will always be relevant, like Snort, we're 25 years into Snort almost, still relevant because it's a classic architecture. Like it does what it does it very well, and it was always built to be something that's that works on any IP network. So we never engineered or rarely engineered for the moment, always engineered for the long haul. And I think, if you're going to build a company, my attitude about building companies is that you always build the best company that you can. So people ask me, hey, Marty, you going to IPO? You going to sell it? What's your goal with the company? My answer is always the same. I build the best company that I possibly can, and good things will happen. And that's, and that's it. So from a shareholder standpoint, there's going to be increasing value, and that's, what you need to know. From a team standpoint, we're going to build cool things and stay competitive in this market and be good to this team, while we build this company. So yeah, I've never really, you get forced by trends like IPS, next gen firewall. There are market forces that force you to respond or force you to get out in front of them, like EDR. And then there are, kind of the classic assumptions, we're going to build this way because this will always be a relevant way to attack this problem.
When you think back to those days, are there any regrets, anything you missed, anything that still gnaws at you?
Ooh. Well, I mean, there are things that gnaw at me, like, the data management backend for our central management platform was like a boat anchor that we had to wear for, 18 years because, we kind of chose poorly in the early days. I don't have too many regrets from a technology standpoint. You really get front row seats for how your decisions turn into inertia when you build these things, which is really fascinating. I kind of joke around, the two objects with the most inertia in the entire universe are a black hole and a software project with one user.
Yeah, that's true.
As soon as it gets a user, like all of a sudden you're constrained with what you can do. This thing's got inertia now. And the more users you get, the more inertia it gets. So yeah, it's really kind of fascinating how the projects develop and how the early decisions that you make impact the, what you can do down the road and things like that. I mean, from a business standpoint, I probably would have tried to structure my Series A little bit differently, stuff like that.
Right. Small operational things. The IPO came right before another market crash that would happen in 2008, right? So you kind of timed it almost perfectly. Can you talk a little bit about like what the public market looked like for cybersecurity companies at that time? And the IPO process, was it a smooth, straightforward thing for you?
Okay.
As I barely remember any of this. I remember writing about you guys IPOing, but I barely remember off the top of my head like what the landscape looked like.
So there weren't a whole lot of security companies that were public at the time, and there was demand for them, right? So cybersecurity is always a hot commodity. I like to say cybersecurity is like plumbing. If the pipes are leaking, people are buying, and baby, right. The pipes are always leaking.
Always leaking.
They're always leaking. Cybersecurity is kind of this, this eternal problem that is always there. And there's a lot of demand for companies that you can invest in to be able to, capture some of the upside. So we saw a lot of hunger, and just from a technology company standpoint, there weren't even a tremendous number of technology companies that were public in 2007.
How much have you raised up to this point now? You had you mentioned a small Series A at around 7. By the time you get to IPO, you had raised how much?
$56 million.
Okay.
Yeah. So not a huge amount of money. And in fact, after
over 7 years though, right? Like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah. Over 6 years, 56 million. And we actually only used about 35 million to get public. We never touched the last 20.
Interesting.
Yeah. We're an extremely cash efficient company, believe it or not. Anyway, yeah, the IPO process, I mean, it was straightforward for me because I didn't have to do very much. I wasn't the CEO at this point. Well, I had hired a CEO, and in fact, I had hired an entire team. So just like the journey of open source was the thing that was kind of interesting to me and one of the drivers for it, the journey of Sourcefire was not just, being this, titan of industry and building my own company and, being, the front man or anything like that. I built Sourcefire, and I very quickly figured out, like, I have a degree in engineering and nothing else. And, I've read a couple of business books, but, up until that point, I'd never run a business. I didn't know anything about it. So
big self-awareness point though, right? Big self-awareness point for a lot of entrepreneurs who have this dream of being CEO of their own company and so on. Was that a difficult internal personal decision for you to realize on your own that, you know what, I'm an engineer, not a business guy. I need to get an expert in here to really do this thing right?
So I was the CEO for the first 16 months of the company, and then at the end. And what I came to realize as I'm doing finance and operations and sales and marketing and still writing code and doing builds and, shipping and receiving and all this other stuff, what I really started to understand was that there are a variety of things that I'm good at a lot of things. I'm great at a very few things, and I'm not very good at several things as well. And I became very worried that the biggest risk that the company faced was my inexperience and my inability to be great at all the things that I needed to be great at to make this company go. So yeah, I made a very conscious decision. It wasn't hard for me to let go. In fact, I was, kind of
looking forward to it.
Well known for, okay, I just hired you to do this function. I'm going to get you up to speed, and then you're going to run with it. Like really offloading onto the people that we hired. But I hired this awesome management team. Like the management team, I got so lucky to hire these great people. They were available, post.com crash and stuff like that. Right. I had this team of hugely capable people who were available. All these people were, every bit as smart as me and smarter. Bring them in to run the company. And then I did just like I did with open source. I started, watching how they did what they did and paying very close attention, sitting in a meeting with a sales meeting with, our chief operating officer who'd been selling since I was in grade school, just watching him talk to customers. What does he say and how does he say it? And how does he keep the conversation going? Or, watching the CEO that I hired, talking to VCs and watching the CFO talking about financial models and understanding kind of what's good and what's bad. Because I didn't know what the difference between, is this number too high? Is this number too low? Things like that. So all those things, just watching all these guys doing their jobs and being in those meetings, all the, from start to finish, all the way up to the multi-billion-dollar acquisition and, getting that over the finish line, just watching all these people, our lawyers and stuff like that. How do they do what they do? How do they talk about it? How do they think about it? What are they telling me? All these kinds of things. Because the journey, if you build a big, powerful company and you bring all these great people on board and then you don't pay attention to what makes them great.
You miss the journey. You miss all those learning opportunities. Yeah.
Right. You're minimizing your upside. That's your upside. It's not just the money and the notoriety and stuff like that. Your upside is turning into a more capable person.
And surrounding yourself with those experts, having some luck that you find the right set of people and so on. So the IPO happens. When did the Immunet acquisition happen? Because that's when I remember Adam O'Donnell and Oliver and those guys, they were building Immunet on the side. We were right around the CDR revolution, if you want to call it that. What was your thinking into, let me pick up an antivirus product here, and what was the plan and the thinking behind it?
Okay, so we bought them
because right around then AV is dead. It's the going vernacular, right?
Well, AV is dead, but client-side attacks are on the rise, right? So client-side attacks, malware is on the rise, and traditional AV is really not getting the job done anymore. So I've known Oliver and Al Huger and Adam. I've known them all for 20 plus years. So they were kind of off doing their thing, and I heard they were doing cloud-based antivirus. And I'm like, what is this? You're uploading files to the cloud and processing them? What makes that smart? So they're kind of doing their own thing, very stealthy for a while. And then we get to 2010, and I'm hearing more and more from my customers, we're really having trouble with client-side attacks, and Snort doesn't really do such a great job with client-side attacks. So what are you going to do? Should we really renew the service contract? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, whoa, let's not get crazy. let's think about it.
So it's driven by a lot by customer demand. Real customer demand.
Real customer demand. And, I didn't necessarily want to get into being an endpoint company per se, but I started, Matt Wachinski, who was the head of VRT, which turned into Cisco
Google
Talos. What's that?
Isn't he at Google Stairwell?
No. Matt Wachinski is at Cisco. He runs Talos.
Oh, he's still at Cisco. Right.
Yeah. So I'd kind of like plugged him and Al and Oliver together to kind of keep tabs on what was going on over there. And eventually Matt came to me one day and he's like, you really need to take a look at what they're doing. So I went and looked at what they were doing.
What was that trigger that, you know what, these guys are onto something here?
It was
because they had a weird model.
It was a weird model, but it was so one of my things that I'm good at is seeing technology just not for what it is, but what for it could be, or what it could be. So he was like, they've got this metadata driven cloud detection architecture is really cool. You should look at it. So I was like, okay, I'll go take a look at it. And I looked at it and I was like, this is incredibly powerful because what it allows you to do. So AMINET/AMP, it turned into Sourcefire and now Cisco AMP. Right. That technology has a write once, detect everywhere backend. So what that means is I can define detection one time in this cloud backend, and it applies to the entire global deployed footprint across all my customers automatically, instantly.
That's how all AV do it now. But back then, this was a revolutionary thing to have this crowd model, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it could do that. And I started looking at it and I started seeing, okay, well, this could be our Windows client-side attack detection and protection capability, but it's got this big cloud backend, which means you can get global intelligence out of what you're seeing, happening everywhere. Also, the way that they do what they do, you could take that and you could move that capability to the network as well. You could do a lot of those functions on the network as well. So catch malware in flight and do something about it, or catch it in a mail server, or catch it on a web proxy. And that'd be really interesting. So I saw all these possibilities. You can put it on Linux, you can put it on Mac OS, and you can build this really powerful anti-malware capability that has these global capabilities on this. And I was like, we got to have it. So I went and I talked to my CEO and I talked to my board and I talked to everybody and I said, we have to go buy this because this is the other piece that turns us into a multi-product company that is going to be more than just, IPS and GFW. This is going to be, the thing that turns us into a much bigger footprint company. So they listened and we pulled the trigger. So it was the last week. It was basically right at the beginning of 2011.
And made it a more complete product.
Happened. Yeah. And we brought them in and they just supported Windows at the time. They were very, very small. We bought the company for $20-something million and a bunch of Sourcefire stock.
Sourcefire which became Cisco stock, and then everyone got,
Well, at the time, Sourcefire stock was trading at, 22-ish. Cisco acquired us for $76 a share. So they got a lot of upside there. And then that $76 a share has doubled since, at least, at Cisco. So good deal, right?
Prior to the Cisco acquisition, which was a $2 billion cybersecurity acquisition, long before Duo and Okta, you guys did it first. You were approached by Check Point, and you had agreed to a deal with Check Point, an Israeli company that agreed to acquire Sourcefire. And that became controversial, very, very controversial off the bat. Can you kind of paint a picture of how that went down? Are there any fun stories about the government calling you late at night?
Well, not so much the government calling me late at night. So what happened? So they came in the summer of 2005. So Sourcefire is a 4-year-old company at this point. We've got our IPS out. We've got RNA out. So, we've got a differentiated product and we're making progress in the market. So that was good. They were seeing customer demand for an IPS, please build an IPS. And I think they had tried to do their own internally, but it was, it wasn't particularly well received. So we started talking to them and they put an offer on the table, $225 million cash deal.
All cash, right?
Yeah, not bad. The board decided to take it and, we were going to be acquired by Check Point. So Check Point's a public company at this point. There's an announcement, this is in the paper.
Did you know off the bat this was going to be controversial? Did you guys go into accepting that offer thinking to yourself, there might be some national security ramifications here?
Okay. There's one funny story here. So, we have the big party, the announcement's out there. A few days later, I'm, in the CEO's office, Wayne Jackson, our CEO at the time. I'm in his office chatting with him, and I'm like, so Wayne, I'm not that I'm counting my money or anything like that, but so how does this actually, what are the next steps in this to get it closed? And he's like, well, there's two big, regulatory hurdles we have to get over. There's Hart-Scott-Rodino, which I think will be easy. That's an antitrust thing. And then there's CFIUS, the Council on Foreign Investment in the U.S. I said, oh, what's that? And he said, well, all the departments of the executive branch have to give the thumbs up to the deal happening for a foreign-held company to buy Sourcefire. I was like, well, departments, which departments? He's like, oh, Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture, DOD, and DOJ. I was like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
DOD and DOJ, they might actually have a problem with this because Snort's everywhere in the government at this point, and it's very well trusted and very, broadly deployed in all sorts of crazy places at this point. I was like, oh boy, well, it'd be interesting to see what they have to say. And what they had to say was, what are you doing? No way.
Did you understand it at the time? Was that a disappointing thing to deal with, or did you understand the ramifications that they had seen? And this is relevant to today because now there's a lot of sanctioned talks around cybersecurity companies and international companies doing business here and who owns what and who's getting kicked out. And it's just become a top of mind thing. But you dealt with it back then. Did you understand it from their perspective, or was that a really super disappointing thing?
Oh no, I understood it. I understood exactly what their issue was. If you're concerned about who owns a piece of software that's widely distributed, it keeps coming off snort.org. Most people don't lift the hood and see what's going on in the open source engine. They just download it and go. So it's kind of funny because I joke around sometimes, and every once in a while, especially when I'm talking to government people, they're like, "Do you have a clearance right now?" And back 20 plus years ago, I had a clearance, but I don't anymore. What I usually respond is, well, no, I don't have a clearance, but the U.S. government trusts me personally, like they trust few other people on planet Earth.
Absolutely, and you have a lot of there's a lot of your own credibility writing there, and a lot of Snort's trust, like you mentioned. It was this trusted thing came on the back of your name and your own relevance.
Right. I didn't, I didn't personally
your shareholders weren't happy about the...
Shareholders weren't happy, but the stock didn't really go down substantively afterwards. It was, we weren't public at the time. Our shareholders were VCs. That's right.
Right.
So of course the stock didn't go down. I think the investors were somewhat disappointed, but once you get one acquisition offer like that, there's a good chance, you're on the right track. You're probably going to be okay and build a real company. And what we did post the Checkpoint, deal getting shut down. So we announced the deal had been shut down in March of 2006. We immediately went out and raised a $20 million Series D round, and then announced we were going to go public.
Right.
So we never actually touched the money in that Series D round. That was just $20 million of gunpowder, essentially, to quiet all the doubters who were saying, "Well, Sourcefire is toast. These guys, they're going to crash and burn now." We're like, "Oh, well, we just raised $20 million, and we're going public in a year or so," and we did.
Did you come close to selling the company to anyone else prior to that? Did you come close to selling the company to another big vendor? I'm trying to think, if it didn't land in Cisco's hand, where would it be today?
No, we did not come close. We had a hostile bid for the company in 2008. Yeah, I don't know if you remember this, but Barracuda threw a bid out publicly.
I don't remember this at all.
Yeah, this was back when Sourcefire stock wasn't doing too well. We had kind of a bumpy start in the public markets, and so our stock price was trading kind of low, and the markets were in turmoil. This is in the middle of 2008, so it's I think June of 2008.
Crisis has just erupted, and everything is collapsing.
Right, and also we're hiring a new. We had publicly announced that we're hiring a new CEO, but he wasn't in the seat yet. So these guys fired in an offer, and we said thank you, but no thank you. So that was it. And then, we had a few sniffs now and then, but nobody got serious about it till Cisco in 2013.
And that was a no-brainer at that time. Because the price tag was surprising to external outsiders. You were not surprised by the price tag, because at that time you guys were on a runaway train.
yeah, we were, our trailing 12-month revenue when we got acquired was something like 250 million. We were growing at 40%.
Wow.
And we had, we had IPS, and we had, the premier IPS engine in the industry. We had our next generation firewall technology, and we had the EDR technology that was just emerging at the time. So, we were getting into a position to be a real powerhouse. So yeah, the price tag, we felt pretty justified with the numbers that we got.
Did Cisco turn out to be the best and most logical, obvious landing spot for you? Do you think that's when you look back at the life of Snort, are you entirely happy with where it is today?
I am. I don't really have regrets about it. Every once in a while, you always do the woulda, coulda, shoulda thing. You see the market expansion that happened from 2015 until the end of last year, and you're like, oh boy, it would have been nice to, control my own destiny a little bit more on that. But what are you going to do? Cisco was a good home for the people and the technology and the customers. Cisco's a really nice place to work. It's very good to its people. They have excellent benefits. The corporate culture there is, it's a huge company, but it's not like super dysfunctional or anything like that. It's actually a nice place to work.
How long did you stick around there?
Well, it gets frustrating, because it's hard to make the giant ship move sometimes. And at my roots, I am something of an engineer, a builder, I'm a guy who likes to make stuff happen. So yeah, it became kind of frustrating for me. And when 17,000 salespeople have your phone number, which is the number of salespeople there, you get pulled into all sorts of stuff, and eventually it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I've been working for 35 years, since I was a teenager, and I was just like, you know what, I'm ready for a little break. So, I literally sailed off into the sunset until the pandemic hit.
And here we are, because we're running out of time, but we got to talk about Netography. You're the CEO of Netography. What do you want with being a CEO of a startup in this environment at your age, with all your accomplishment? Where do you find those juices?
Well, so the thing that Netography has built is exactly the thing that I thought should be built if you're going to keep doing network-based security. So here's
start
the
right
funny
there.
stories.
What have they built?
So it's deep down inside, it's a platform for telling you what you've got, what it's doing, and what's happening to it. Sort of like an intrusion detection or prevention engine, sort of like a network discovery and mapping system, but it doesn't operate on packets. It operates on flow data. And as a result, it can take data in from all the different cloud providers. They all support flow data and all the on-prem infrastructure that people have in their enterprises. So it can give you one global picture of what we call the atomized network, which is kind of this, all these enterprises today have these atoms of presence and these atoms of compute that are scattered across the major cloud providers and in their on-prem infrastructure. And they have a really hard time of getting their hands around, just the basics. What have I got? What is it doing? What's happening to it? And what's happening to it, that can be it's under attack, or it's, not sending out packets and it hasn't been for a while, or, whatever. So each one of those those three categories, you open the lid of each one of them, there's a lot in each one of those categories. But the thing that really got me interested in it is that it's a metadata analytics platform on the one hand, but what we did with AMP, with EDR, I was really fascinated. Like, we bought AMP because the architecture that Oliver and Adam and Al built.
And AMP is what Immunet became, right?
AMP is what Immunet became. That architecture, that global detection backend, where you just update the backend and your entire deployed footprint globally becomes capable against that threat. It's incredibly powerful. And I spent years thinking about how would you do that, but for network traffic, network activity, because it only works on files and processes in the in the AMP world. But what if I wanted to do that on the network? And the idea for the platform I came up with, I never built, but I started advising the Netography guys back in 2019, and they built exactly what I thought should be built. It's got this, this write once detect everywhere backend, global, the global footprint is protected simultaneously, so on and so forth. So I thought, wow, these guys are, really on the right thing. And it's not an appliance architecture, and it's not doing deep packet inspection to do it. It's the right architecture. It's low friction. It's pure SaaS. There's nothing to deploy to make it work. And it can do these cool things that nobody has figured out how to do yet. And it's really powerful. So, I jumped into the company because I thought competitively, it was an architecturally superior approach, and nobody was prepared to compete with this approach to doing things. So I thought, we'd have a lot of room to run once I got in here, displacing existing vendors, plus just going into spaces with companies that recognize, hey, I do have one of these atomized networks. And I have no way to get visibility everywhere right now, and I need it. I can't see what's happening in multi-cloud environments. I do whatever CloudTrail on Amazon, and I do whatever on GCP, and I've got some stuff trying to keep tabs of what's going on in my enterprise network, and there's these huge gaps between them. And, as I say, attackers live in the gaps. So we have something that's, got this gapless architecture, and it's very, very powerful.
Let me ask you the obvious question. What is the Gartner acronym for this? Because I'm hearing, I'm hearing attack surface management, I'm hearing network discovery, I'm hearing, some sort of digital, like HD Moran is working on Rumble. I'm hearing some of that as well. Where do you, how do you see, what is the category here?
That's a great question. We actually talked to Gartner a couple of months ago and told them what we were up to. And, we originally, when I first showed up here, we were calling ourselves NDR, but we
NDR meaning network detection and response, like EDR, but
right, exactly.
Because that's the limitation of EDR, is that it doesn't cover the network.
Doesn't, right. All the network stuff's out of scope. So this stuff,
so is this XDR? Yeah, I'm hearing that XDR acronym as well. But what are you hearing from the Gartner folks about where you fit?
Well, what they said was you're not NDR or XDR. You're something different, and in fact, it sounds like you're something new. And and we don't know what to call it, so we'll figure it out.
Is that a good thing, though? I mean, is that a good thing for your sales cycle and for your sales and marketing operations to fit who your target audience profile is? And
well, okay, so that's an excellent question. So from to all you entrepreneurs out there, do you want to be in a Gartner category or do you not want to be in a Gartner category? Well, budget gets allocated in categories typically, so it's probably better to be in a category than not in a lot of ways on the one hand. But on the other hand, if you are defining a new category, if you are the new thing, then that has value all to itself, even though it's not necessarily in the classic budget cycles that you see. And what we're seeing when talking to customers is when, they're just prospects, we get in there and we start telling them what we're up to. And like the people who get it, they're like, oh, really? You're doing that? Okay. Yes, we need that. And, very rapid turnaround. These customer engagements are lasting 3 or 4 months instead of, 3 or 4 quarters. Right. So it's really kind of fascinating. The people who get it really get it. And we think that's just the leading edge of the early adopters. So yeah, it's great question.
You've got a few more minutes? Because I want to just tackle one small thing about you as a CEO at a startup at this stage. You're intrigued by the intellectual challenge. You're an engineer at heart and a builder at heart. But the CEO of the startup is a fundraiser. Like you're selling and fundraising. And you talked about being pulled into sales meetings. The majority of startup CEOs are the best salespeople. The good CEOs are the best salespeople. How do you navigate that world of where the intellectual challenge and the fun is versus the reality of running a startup in this environment, in this market where fundraising becomes more difficult and so on? Like, is that a crazy thing in your head?
It's not. I actually kind of look at it as all aspects of the same problem, which is making this company successful, right? So I was talking to somebody about this recently. I almost look at it. So one of the things that Sourcefire was back in the day was it was almost like a hack of business models. Like, how do we get people to pay for something that's free? So I'm going to hack a business model that achieves that, right? So like selling and financing the thing and like getting in front of people and convincing them to, start adopting your worldview and nodding their heads up and down when you're talking about, the theories and concepts here. That really actually is very entertaining for me. I really love seeing people seeing the lights go on, because I'm a bit of a fast talker, and that I think comes from my upbringing. I grew up in a very non-technical family, so when people were asking me about what I was up to, I would always try to get as much information out as quickly as possible before they lost interest. Right. So I've been working, my entire life on like getting to the lights on moment of, aha, I understand what you're talking about. That's actually, I really enjoy that part of it. The moment of insight that, that gets people to all of a sudden, like, you see it. You can actually see it on people's faces when the lights go on. And so, I wouldn't call it social engineering or anything like that, but it's the hacker mindset applies to all of these problems. Like the hacker mindset of how do I decompose this in ways that are different and tweak the system to make it do what I want to do.
Everywhere across the board.
Yeah.
Are you bullish on cybersecurity still? Are you bullish on security even in this environment with, there's the venture capital world, the valuations seem to be out of control. It seems very, very chaotic times. When you look forward, are you bullish and excited about where things are? Because I have a larger question, Marty. We've been doing this for 20 years, right? And we've spent billions and billions and billions of dollars on security over the years, but we still have a ransomware epidemic. And every big organization will say, if I haven't found an APT in my network, it's because I haven't looked hard enough. So it feels like, where are we? Are you an optimist that we're heading in the right direction and things are being fixed? Or are you, this kind of realist that after all this money is spent, we still seem to be insecure?
Well,
I'll leave it there. I'll use that as the last question because we're really running out of time.
That's a deep question. Okay. So, on the one hand, the fundamentals are getting better. So whether the CPU processing architectures are getting more secure, the operating systems have more security features that are built into them to make it harder for there to be things like buffer overflows and heap overflows and SQL injection and things like that.
Look at the Chrome list of bugs every other week. It's a list of memory corruption issues. Apple's Mac OS advisories are full of memory corruption issues. As much as there are sandboxes and roadblocks and mitigations here and there everywhere, we still seems to be back in the same boat. I don't know.
Yeah, it's memory management is tough. So, there's been tons and tons of kind of fundamental work and even, zero trust architecture
MFA and a lot of that stuff,
multi-factor authentication, all that stuff. There's been a lot of great inroads made in a lot of areas to secure things more effectively on the one hand. On the other hand, there is also the problem of, so this is, this will probably be a great wrap up. So one of the things that I like to talk about, we talk about TAM in the startup world, total addressable market. So this is how much money is available in a space for a startup to go after. So I would posit to you that TAM for attackers, TAM for the hackers is lines of code, right? Because lines of code, for every 1,000 lines of code that you write, there's going to be some statistically normal number of those lines that have bugs in them, and some statistically normal percentage of those bugs are going to be security bugs. So what happens if I exponentially increase the number of lines of code that are written every year?
Code. We're creating more code than we are capable of even realistically securing. I mean, that's just the reality of where we are. So we're on this hamster wheel forever, basically.
So, and that's TAM for bad guys, right? So,
that's the worst place to leave it. That's a depressing take, but I agree with you. I mean, I'm not a big fan of where we are. I just feel like after all this investment and spend, this is where we are.
Yeah, I mean, this microphone has software on it. My light bulbs have software on it. We're putting software on everything. Is everybody who's writing that software should they be? So,
Marty, thank you very much. You got to come back because I haven't touched on half of my questions here. Appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Okay, Ryan. Yeah, definitely. I loved it. I'd be happy to come back sometime. Just let me know.
Thank you, my friend. Thanks.